I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Let's get to the seriousness. You know, that's why we bring Dedrick on for the series. Let's wash away the silliness. Let's get to the business.
I can bore your listeners now, right? Is that
oh no, this is not boring. It is not boring.
This is the meat.
To have a race and wealth report that we are grateful for you bringing to our platform to talk about what is really going on with the economic condition of Black and other communities beyond what is the fantasy. So I know, and honestly, I cannot remember. I did this again. You have you are the head of the racial wealth.
I was.
National Community Reinvestment Coalition. Where are all these official titles now?
It doesn't really matter. I used to be the chief of race, wealth, and community. Now I oversee some different departments. They call me the chief of membership, policy, and equity. It doesn't really matter. I got to focus on race, wealth, and inequality, no matter what job I have, no matter what title I have. So the title don't really matter.
This is with the National Community Reinvestment Coalition.
That is right.
And you've worked with many others so okay, we'll get that. We'll straighten that out eventually. One of these days I'll get that. The brother keeps getting promoted. That's what it really is. He keeps, every time we turn around, he gets promoted, so we can't keep up with, he's doing good work. So Dedrick, you came specific purpose this morning, and we definitely appreciate it, because it is it is timely that we're going from a segue to what may be at least economic mythologies and plans being put forth in some sectors of the community that may not reflect the actual reality economically of Black or other communities. So let's get caught up here.
Yeah, so there's a new Bureau of Labor's report, and I can give the Netfa Freeman, summary, or Blacks are still poor and we're still marginalized, right? Like that's the quick, as you would say, capitalism sucks. We need socialism, and we're still disenfranchised. So like that's the Netfa Freeman.
All right, thanks everybody. It's been great seeing you, Dedrick. Have a great day. We'll see you. It's always a pleasure to have you come.
I'll see y'all next month. Yes,
indeed. Appreciate it, and we'll get our next update then. All right, everybody. Anyway. And there's great truth to that ongoing summary. You know, they put out the most recent unemployment numbers monthly, and what we see, the biggest thing that came out of these numbers is they keep thinking the economy is going to jump back, right? And last month they thought there was going to be 720,000 new jobs, right? And there was only 235,000. In September, they thought it was going to be okay. We'll temper our expectations. We'll expect 500,000 job growth, and there's only 194,000. So it's clear that though people want to be done, particularly with the COVID economy, COVID isn't done with the national economy, right? And so, and African Americans, we jump around from, I think last month meaning to August, we were around 8.8% unemployment, and now we're went down to 7.9% unemployment. So that is good, though more Blacks left the labor market as a whole. And I think that's one thing we're going to find with the COVID economy. I mean, I think we're all kind of reeling with this, is that the COVID change is lasting so long that for some people it's becoming permanent. So people who stepped away from the job market because they had to stay home, take care of their kids, or whatever, or I'm going to do an early retirement because I don't feel comfortable going into work. We're seeing more and more of that being permanent. But what is also permanent, and one thing I was looking at, it's a little bit more of historical data, was just, I think wealth is the best indicator of where people are socioeconomically, right? Better than income, because blacks of the same income of whites have radically less wealth. And that, makes it much more challenging during good times and bad times. And what I was just looking at, it's interesting. Blacks and whites still have not gotten back to the wealth level that they had pre the Great Recession. So the Great Recession was 2007. And I think politically, a lot of people don't understand, like, why are people still so mad about the economy, what have you. And even at the height of the Trump economy, where like unemployment was really low, things were booming, whites still hadn't got back. Whites hadn't got back.
I was going to say, Dedrick, are you saying even white folks?
Even whites hadn't got back to their wealth level pre-Great Recession. Now, again, they're still at around $170,000 median wealth, while blacks are down at $9,000. So it's a radical difference. But
$9.
Yeah. but still, it's something you notice, right? Like when 10 years ago you were doing better and you still haven't gotten back to where you were. I think that is kind of an ongoing angst in the economy, though we kind of get lost in terms of this COVID recession. But I'll also put forth one other thing. You're talking about like mythologies of the economy. I think one big mythology that we're fighting, that we're dealing with, is the Democrats, I think, mythology, Democratic establishment of, if we can just pass our bills, right, we will solve everything. And it is fascinating. They want to spend trillions of dollars, like, unheard of until Trump did his $1 trillion bailout of the COVID economy. But what's interesting to me is that we can spend trillions, but I've seen no analysis of how much will the racial wealth gap close when they're spending, whether it's 1.3 trillion on the infrastructure, whether it's an extra 3.5 trillion on the social infrastructure. I've seen, and again, doesn't mean there's not some good things in those bills, but there's been no analysis that we're going to spend 3 trillion, 4 trillion, and we can close the black-white wealth divide by what? Like, just give me 20%, give me 30%. You have to close the whole thing. But there's no analysis on that. It's just no, trust us, go forward, support these bills. And I'm concerned that after we do all this spending, we're going to see it maybe did nothing around the racial wealth divide.
Well, I mean, I always wonder, how would it? Because if as I understand what that spending means, it's spending on either already established big time manufacturers, big time, I don't know, for other areas of spending on nonprofits maybe, or wherever. But so all that does is enrich or fund people who then they might claim through some trickle down are going to hire more black people, or but we already know that doesn't work, or that's not how it goes. So it's not like if they, these infrastructure bills, there's going to be a whole bunch of hiring of black construction workers or black construction companies that are themselves going to hire a whole bunch of black people. That's going to have some national collective meaningful impact on the relationship to the broader economy, or to white people. So I've never understood the spending in that way isn't going to close or change the inequality. It's if anything going to allow the 10% in that drop that whites have experienced to go up, maybe. And for those who own the economy or who are big players in the economy to have their stock value go up, et cetera, and so forth. But in terms of these grand shifts that are needed, I don't see how that would happen anyway. But please correct anything that is.
No. I think the most positive things they're talking about in the big social care bill is, this idea of I think like universal child care up to a certain age, and these types of things, which are very positive, right? But again, I think you were highlighting that our economy de facto is racist, right? So if you do a spend, it de facto, it just won't go to us in the way it needs to bridge inequality. The only way it will is if you target it to our communities. And the basic thing is, well, we can't target our communities because we have to help everybody, which means not us that much. And we have to get, conservative Democrats to sign on, and conservative Democrats won't sign on to anything. Well, the argument is conservative Democrats won't sign anything that'll target blacks, but it's also true, even quote unquote liberal Democrats rarely will even put forth a bill that suggests such a thing. So, it's all of that is part, of the game, and so I think out of that is the reason why people write books, boss up. Because it's like, what else are you going to do if you look at the political establishment and all you see is, Biden or Trump? Yeah, I guess you better boss up because we're kind of stuck by ourselves.
And I when you said that that the Democrats won't even put forth a bill, I couldn't help but think of Kamala Harris and her, well, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do anything just for Black people. Don't ever forget that she said that.
Yeah,
y'all.
That was crazy. I mean, it wasn't crazy, but yeah, it was kind of natural, but it still was bothersome. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but Dedrick, I mean, somebody asked about Black people in the labor market. Did Black people drop out of the labor market, or did they just stop looking for jobs? I mean, I think that's when the labor report comes out, and if people know the history of that labor report, it's kind of sketchy. It hasn't always been accurate. It's not entirely accurate now. It doesn't include a lot of things that it should. So it's always kind of confused me. What do those numbers really mean? Like the participation in the labor force? Does it represent people who were, the last hired, first fired kind of thing? And, mostly that's us. People who, like you said, opted out of jobs, early retirement, or just stopped looking. So, I mean, what is the reality of the way Black people participate in that labor report? Were they forced out, or did they just say, I've been looking for a job that pays a decent wage for 3 years and there's nothing and I just can't look anymore.
So I just quit and I'm going to write a book, boss up.
Yeah, boss up. That's right. Or, and I think for a lot of people, it just means I'm not officially looking for a job. I'll get paid under the table, working at this restaurant, or maybe doing some type of construction that's not, 100% legal. Because that's the thing is, just because you drop out of the labor market doesn't mean you're not working, right? Like it could mean you're working a lot for, wages that aren't even minimum wage, right? Or it could be, look, it doesn't make sense for me spending my time looking for a job. I have an aunt who's sick, who really needs someone to help take care of her. I'm staying home, taking care of her, and then maybe waiting tables off the books, right? So it doesn't mean people want to act like it's kind of some laziness type thing. But it's not that at all. It's just that there aren't, and I think, that's the overall piece, even with the growing of the economy, the numbers are so small, the opportunity isn't big. And so people aren't, rushing into the labor market thinking, oh, I can get a good job with good benefits. And so I think, that's the challenge. And again, also, that doesn't include, unemployment numbers don't include those people who aren't in the labor market, which includes those who are in prison, these types of things, right? So again, I mean, and that's why it's helpful to look at the labor participation rate. If it's like 63% for, well, actually, yeah, it greatly underestimates how many, it doesn't underestimate, it's just not including large sectors of African-American population who aren't even in those numbers, right? And that's why I like things like wealth numbers, because it kind of gives you a general idea of where the community is at large. But again, what's crazy to me is we're having these conversations around trillions of dollars, but yet now it's not the approach. Trillions of dollars, Democrat president, Democrat Senate, Democrat Congress. We won because of the Black vote. We have our first Black woman vice president, but now's not the time to talk about dealing with racial disparity, even though the country just had the great, whatever they call it, reckoning or something like that after George Floyd's death, right? But the reckoning doesn't include spending on bridging racial economic inequality, particularly for Black people.
Although Black people definitely deserve targeted, specific policy, my first reaction whenever I hear Black or anyone else say, Black politicians or anyone else say we can't do something specific for Black people is, I will fine, then just end poverty, period. Just end unemployment, period. Like wipe it out for everybody then give everybody health care. Then, wipe out everybody's debt. I'm cool, fine. If you don't want to just target, then wipe out everything, but don't use that as an excuse to go back to obviously doing nothing. And please respond to that. But I also wanted you to add something specific about this point that the unemployment numbers also don't even address the quality of the jobs that people are technically getting that takes them off unemployment lists. I mean, like how in terms of quality employment, substantive employment, life improving employment, as opposed to I'm barely making it and I technically have a job employment.
Well, and I think
go ahead.
I think that's one of the with the COVID social safety net, which has been coming to an end, right? Where you could get more money for as part of your unemployment, where you could get money unemployment if you were self-employed. I think a positive thing was that people were like, well, look, I'm not going back to making $10 an hour, right? Where it takes it costs me this amount of money just to get to work and all this other stuff, and I'm barely pulling anything, so it's not even worth it, right? It's like I think that is a positive thing, I think, for the worker psyche. It just the challenging thing is there's no kind of organized ability to use that power to actually demand a long-term change, right? Because they've already cut back now on all of those benefits, and at some point you're going to either go into the quote-unquote labor market, or you're going to go do an off-the-book side hustle because you have to survive, right? And so that is a big challenge. I think the one thing about targeted, though, is you can target communities without saying in a law, well, only blacks get these jobs, right? Because all the time, whites are targeted to make sure they get disproportionate benefits, right? Every time they talk about a poverty program, every time they talk about a poverty program, they say we got to make sure we deal with rural community. They mean we got to make sure we get it to a lot of poor whites, right? And we got to disproportionately get it to poor whites. And so there's targeting all the time, right? They can't target our community, or they won't target our community generally.
Well, they also target poor whites by imprisoning us and putting us out in poor white communities to hire poor whites to guard us. So that's a targeted poor white program as well. But anyway, go ahead, Jackie.
Dedrick, I mean, I'm thinking of the these two bills, the infrastructure, physical infrastructure, and the human infrastructure bill, right? And we keep talking about the big numbers of the bill, the 1.5 trillion for the infrastructure and 3.5 for the human infrastructure, which the 3.5 is not that's not going to pass. We know that's not going to pass. But what the media never talks about is that those figures, though large, are spread out over 10 years, both of those bills. So it's not 1.5 trillion a year. It's 1.5 trillion divided by 10.
Yeah, 150 billion a year.
Yeah. So when we look at that, and to Jared's point, why don't we just wipe out poverty? Not we, but the politicians, particularly the Democrats. Why don't they just wipe out poverty? Why don't they just wipe out unemployment? When you look at the amount of money that is spent every year that Democrats vote for the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy, because the nuclear capabilities of this country are in the Department of Energy, not the Department of Defense. And a lot of people don't understand that. This year, the defense budget was $778 billion. That's for 1 year. And that's a $25 billion increase over last year, I think. And every
what was the number again? 700 and what?
This year I think it's $778 billion.
That's right. And so and no one's talking about the $7.8 trillion military defense thing that just passed, right? Because they never cut back. They never cut back on the military. So once you go up, that's what it's going. So you can estimate for the next 10 years, it'll at least be that, probably go higher than that. But you're right, there's no discussion of a $7.8 trillion defense package.
So, I mean, how do we, I know we do that on this platform, and I know this is something that you bring up, but see, this is my problem with the boss up argument, because we cannot have these arguments. We can't have these discussions about the legitimacy of capitalism at all when we've got a political apparatus that will, on one hand, give the Department of Defense, let's just say that the number is just $778 billion every single year, but then turn around and tell us, well, we can't do any more than that for you. I mean, it's like, how do we keep having these, lending legitimacy to these arguments of there is anything that we personally can do to improve our situation when our money is legit being stolen by these mugs up in Washington, and we never make that point. We would rather give legitimacy to these people who are like, boss up, start your own business, get on your hustle, rather than to ignore those folks and confront the people who are actually stealing our money, to tell them, give us our stuff or else. And I think for me, it's like the or else part is the part that we don't want to do.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think the radical way of doing that is that, because, people do need to deal with their own personal finance, right? And like, people don't just want to protest exclusively a government that's not giving up the money. But I think the important thing is bringing that together. Like, look, there's trillions, there's plenty of money out there, right? They're not giving to us, so we should demand it. While we doing that, how do you economically survive, right? An economic survival program, right? And so, it's just like, whatever, everybody makes allusions to the Black Panther Party breakfast program. It wasn't that giving a breakfast to kid was radical in itself. It wasn't overthrowing capitalism, but it was addressing an immediate community need. And so I think there is a space for personal finance, boss up, as long as you talk about the context of, we have to boss up because they have all of these trillions of dollars. They're not giving it to us. We're using this as a survival tactic while we fight to, redistribute the wealth that is all around us that's not being given to us. So I think that's the way to bring those things together. Because I think on the other side, some people just want to talk policy all day, but people still feel so disconnected from policy. They're like, well, what can I do to improve my own life? So how do you bring those things together, I think, is a challenge that a lot of Black radical organizations are also dealing with. I mean, they're all dealing with, because everybody has some type of survival programs. But, what does that mean when you're trying to also advance, radical political change?
Right.
So for the easy part of the discussion, I did want to ask if you had any particular updates around Indigenous populations, given this is Indigenous Peoples Day. And, conventionally we hear that most are living off of $2 or less a day. But I thought maybe we could just have an easy conversation about how, they're all good. They have a day recognizing them. The Washington football team changed its name. And so, just like Black folks, everybody's on this automatic trajectory to walking off into the sunset, like it's all anyway. So I did want to at least ask that. I don't know if you do, or if I'm putting you on the spot or not, but I don't.
There is, people can Google Native American racial wealth divide snapshot, and we did that last year. It's always hard to get Native American information, and so it's a little dated. It probably uses 2013 data, but and we will be updating that in the next 6 months because some new data is coming forward. But generally, it's interesting how much Native American income, wealth, home ownership's a little bit different. It's similar to African Americans. One thing I don't like people do is oftentimes people want to only look at Native Americans on reservations. Though most Native Americans live in cities. Like the place with the biggest Native American population is New York City. Why? Because it's 11 million people. It's huge, right? And so I think there's a lot, and there's politics behind that, like the kind of paid political force that advocates for Native Americans are tribal governments. And so they're focused on getting more money for their tribal government on the reservation. They're not as focused on, the poor Native Americans in urban towns or what have you. But their area, in terms of unemployment, in terms of income, they're, very similar. Like African American median households around $44,000 a year, which I think is important to bring up. That's a household. That's not one person, right? So the household is 44,000. Native Americans is usually right around that. Should be around like $41,000 a year. So, again, I think it's just important to recognize that, most Native, like my wife's a registered member of the Lenni Lenape tribe, right? And so a lot of people just wouldn't, think of Native Americans as some people off distant in the West on some reservation, but they're actually, a small part of the population, but they're all across the country. And I don't think it's a coincidence. They're still deeply economically disenfranchised and don't seem to be on any path of greater economic equity, and that's important to recognize on Indigenous Peoples Day.
I just want to quickly mention that tomorrow at I think it's 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. Yeah, 1 p.m. Tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern, Ward Churchill will be live on here with Kalanji Changa on Black Power Media, and I think I'm going to join too. I think I'm going to work it out so I can jump in with them. And I raise that not only because Ward Churchill, one of the elder statesmen of Indigenous resistance and radical political engagement, co-authors you see here of the COINTELPRO papers. He is also one of the people many years ago that put me on, just through reading his work, to the amount of wealth that continues to be extracted from lands formerly held not only by all Indigenous, because this was all their land, of course, but that is still their land, recognizes their land today. That even land that they're supposedly still in control or ownership of, it's still producing wealth that they don't appreciate or enjoy. So look forward to hearing from him again as well tomorrow.
Ward Churchill was one of the first speakers I brought to college campuses, and his studying him, and the COINTELPRO papers is so foundational, but even studying what was done to him, right? And how when he, you're supposed to have tenure and untouchable once you have tenure, but as a person who speaks about Native American rights, and he, was put forth that he didn't have so many tears to cry during 9/11, when you have a small terrorist attack, when you're Indigenous people who face genocide against this nation, how they went at him at every way until they were able to, he was building up one of the strongest and most radical ethnic studies departments in the country. And they really came at him with knives drawn after 9/11 to, hurt him in his profession as much as possible. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned by his writings and Ward Churchill's life.
Yeah, I don't know how much he'll talk about it tomorrow, but again, a point where I really wish my memory did work better, because at the time I went into the rabbit hole on that case, and I read a lot of the transcripts, the testimony, and of course the official argument had nothing to do with what he said. He was said to have said about 9/11. It was all about issues of plagiarism.
Yep.
And and when you see Derek Bell was one of the more famous people to speak on his behalf, testify on his behalf, but there was to see the way the institution, the academic world as an institution, could align itself and then say, and with people who come from areas with no expertise on these fields, judging him as having somehow plagiarized his work and not proving their case. I mean, it was such an incredible display of fraudulence and hustlery. I mean, it was crazy. So you're right. The knives drawn is a perfect description. I mean, that's how, and it's wild to see. I don't know. It was wild just to see how much was done. And so I don't know how much, because I remember years ago, I invited him on my then radio show, and I remember doing the intro, and I introduced him as being embattled. And when he got on air, the first thing he said to me was, "I am not embattled." And he went into this thing about I am being, I'm being dealt with unjustly. I'm not doing him justice, but his point was, I'm not, this is not some, legit exchange. This is not some I'm
Yeah.
just being done wrong. Like it's just I'm just being, you know. So it's anyway. Hopefully we'll get to into some.
And
anyway,
I think the important thing too to remember that is it's interesting, this whole thing around cancel culture and how much that's kind of, it's fascinating to me how much cancel culture is like used, like cancel culture is bad and wokeness is bad. And it's like, it's interesting how they're conflating these things to make, well, yes, critiquing white supremacy or critiquing things like, you know, when it's really most of, you know, cancel culture in power is liberal establishment shutting down things, right? And they'll shut down conservatives, they'll shut down leftist radicals. It just with, you know, whatever they deem is politically correct. But so much in white dialogue, politically correct means standing up for people of color, versus really what politically correct means is following the politics of a liberal establishment. And if you step outside of that, they will shut you down. And they've always done it, right? It just some white males started shutting down, and then it was a horror. Versus, you know, our people always shut down with political correctness and cancel culture. And you literally, but it's much more dire consequences. It's not you don't get a show. It's like you can't feed your family. Like that's how cancel culture works for you know, people of color who are radicals, right?
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. What I like, what I like, what I like.